Well, hello there and welcome. You are listening to the Kindness Matters podcast, and I am your host, Mike Rathbun. What is this podcast all about? It's about kindness. It's a pushback against everything negative that we see in the news and on social media today, and it's a way to highlight people, organizations that are simply striving to make their little corner of the world a little better place. If you want to join in on the conversation, feel free. Go ahead and follow us on all of your social media feeds. We're on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. We're even on LinkedIn under Mike Rathbun. Check us out. And in the meantime, so sit back, relax, enjoy, and we'll get into the Kindness Matters podcast. Hey everybody, welcome to the Kindness Matters podcast. I am your host, Mike Rathbun, as always. As I say on every show, if you hear something in this podcast that moves you or inspires you or motivates you to do some more kindness in the world, think about sharing this podcast with your friends, family, coworkers, strangers on the street, whoever you happen to meet. And let them know that you found a podcast that made you feel pretty good. And I would appreciate it so much. I appreciate you tuning in to listen to our show for half an hour this week. And hope to see you back at it again next time. Okay, so I have a great show for you guys today. My guest today is Sean Dougherty. And he's an experienced executive director with a demonstrated history of working in the media production industry. He has a BA from Temple and worked as the director of operations for HopeWorks in Camden, New Jersey, which is another nonprofit. But since 2013, he is the executive director of the small yet powerful nonprofit Vamos. I feel like I have to say that with emphasis because I know you guys have that exclamation mark. Yep. That works with the poor in Mexico. Welcome to the show, Sean. I appreciate you being here.
Mike, thanks a lot for having me.
Yeah, this is Vamos. Now, and there's two meanings for that, right? In Mexican, that means let's go.
Yep.
Right? But it's also and I'm not going to think of the name of the word.
It's an acronym.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so we use it as an acronym for our official incorporated name, which is Vermont Associates for Mexican Opportunity and Support, VAMOS.
Perfect. Oh, you know what? I think I was saying that without the S at the end. Vamos. Mm-hmm. I think I said it Vamo. Anyway, I apologize. So now this all started back in, 1986-ish?
Yep.
When a group of people went down to Mexico on was it a vacation or was it?
So Mike, our story is that my dad was an educator and he retired at the age of 55 and moved up to the town of Weston, Vermont. So Western Vermont, one of the things it's known for, it has maybe, less than 500 people live in town, but there is a Benedictine priory. There are monks there who have a kind of a farm and a priory there, and they invite the public in. Okay. So my parents were active participants there, as were many, many people, and the brothers had a relationship with sisters, Catholic nuns, in Cuernavaca, Mexico. And so the nuns would offer retreats. So where if you wanted to, as a church group or as individuals, go and kind of experience a time of contemplation and reflection led by the sisters. So,
okay.
So my parents, Dick and Agnes Dougherty, and another couple who lived in town with them, Bill and Patty Coleman, and another guy named Ike Patch, who was a retired diplomat. Bill and Patty and my parents went on the retreat. Ike Patch, meanwhile, went to visit the migrating butterflies, the monarch butterflies, who spend the winter right outside of Mexico City.
Oh, okay.
And they got back to their home, and over a cup of coffee in somebody's kitchen, they talked about their experience. And hey, did they have a good time? Yes, we enjoyed ourselves. But all of them also mentioned the poverty that they saw there. So, and remarked how it was perhaps different than the poverty here in the States. There were dirt floors and crippled people and children, asking for money on the streets. And so they said, "Hey, we'd like to do something about this. So what can we do?" So they were in their late 50s, early 60s. They said right then and there, "We can do something. Let's do something." So they called a friend to help them form a 501c3, a charitable organization. They talked about what they could do. They asked some friends to help them. And they were introduced to a contact there who was running a sewing co-op for women. And so he needed help buying sewing machines and supporting these women. So my parents and the group got some money together, sent it down to them. After 6 or 9 months or so, they Bill and Patty went down to visit, and lo and behold, there were no sewing machines. There was no
Oh,
co-op.
no.
So yeah, so right off the bat, failure and embarrassment and what to do next. So after a lot of discernment, Bill and Patty, who ran a small publishing house, actually decided to move to Cuernavaca. So they gave up their
Oh,
life here. They moved there in order to what they called walk with the poor and listen to the poor and see what the poor needed, and then with the resources that they had and they could get, we could maybe help them reach some of their goals. So that was the idea.
okay. That's really important. I first of all, I love the thought of creating a nonprofit um, over a cup of coffee at somebody's kitchen table. That's always where the best helping hand ideas come from, I think. It's just people getting together and going, "Yeah, this sucks. Let's do something about it."
Yeah, and so often, Mike, the conversation ends with "this sucks." So here, though, this is a great story. Just normal people saying, "This sucks. I wonder if we can help." Well, what if we do this, and what if we do that, and what if we ask others to help us? And the story is, if you fast forward to the end, we are now an organization that that runs 10 community centers, so kind of like after school programs here in the States. We serve 150,000 meals a year. We have
Wow.
classes from preschool through high school. We also have a lot of adult classes for women. We have computer classes, English classes. We have a dentist on staff to provide free dental help, a doctor on staff to provide free medical help, and a psychologist on staff, and this is so important, to do both individual counseling and group counseling. And to have free mental health care for the poor here in the United States is unheard of, and certainly in Mexico it is as well. So we're so proud of that. We have computer
Yeah.
classes, we have music classes, we have art classes. Um, we work with another group who allows us to loan women. We loan them $100, and it can make all the difference in the world to them. They pay it back when they can. And now we have combined with another organization. We're offering scholarships, so college scholarships and elementary and secondary scholarships to some of the poorest kids around. So that's really making a huge difference in their lives.
Wow. Yeah, because that could have all ended. I mean, none of that could have happened if it had ended with "this sucks."
Right,
Um,
right.
as it so oftentimes does. Um, but I mean, all of that didn't exist when Bill and Patty first moved down there, right? I mean, you sent all
Right.
this money down there to buy sewing machines, and you go down and it's like, hey, where's the sewing machines? They're not here. Um, so, and I really love the idea that they took the opportunity because they talked to the poor people down there, right? And they said,
Right.
they
So
worked with them, they lived
yeah.
among them, and they said, what do you need?
Right. So Bill and Patty had experience, smart people, and right from the start they decided, hey, we're not going to go down there as North Americans and say, hey, we know what you need. We know that you need to start a farm co-op or a sewing co-op, right? We know that we can build you playgrounds or build you houses. What Bill and Patty did was hang around. They hung around the main Zocalo, the central plaza in Cuernavaca, where there's lots of people from the small towns selling crafts. And they
Okay.
hung around some of the outskirts of town, some of the poorer neighborhoods. And they listened, and people welcomed them and invited them in. And so after maybe 6 or 9 months, they got a group of mostly women who were selling on the streets and said, "Hey, um, what what can we do for you? What dreams do you have? What's your future?" And the women were, shy and almost couldn't articulate a future because their future was tomorrow. Their future
They
was
probably never considered even being asked that.
right, right. And so when their first response was, "Hey, you know what we could use? We could use a bathroom. We sell on the streets. The store owners won't let us in. We have no place to go to the bathroom."
Oh
And
my.
so, hey, we could do that. We rented some porta potties. We talked to a church downtown who let us put them behind the church. And, hey, check that off the box. We solved a problem. Um,
Yeah.
but in addition to that, the women said, we come from these small towns and our children are here with us and they don't go to school and they don't know how to read and write. And we don't know how to read and write.
Oh boy.
So Patty and Bill thought about that. At the same time, they said, if we don't sell enough, we don't have money to buy food. And one woman talked about going to bed with their children being hungry and how that made her feel as a mother that she couldn't provide for her children. So
Yeah.
Patty and Bill said, okay, we rented a room. We asked some women for help. We bought food. We served a meal in the afternoon. A dozen people came, 2 dozen people came, 40, 50. So it started to grow.
You
Patty and
needed a
Bill,
bigger room?
right. Patty and Bill knew no Spanish when they moved down there. So they were learning how to read Spanish. The people mostly spoke an indigenous language called Nahuatl there.
Oh
So
yeah.
they began to learn together how to read and write Spanish. And it just continued to grow. People in other neighborhoods began to come and say, hey, can you help us too?
Oh.
And as we worked with them for a period of time and formed a partnership and said, yes, we can come there, but the partnership would be we need a place to operate. We need where can we do this? And so they would have some land. So maybe Vamos would buy the cinder blocks, and they would raise the walls, and we'd have a place, and now we could start serving there once a week or whatever it might be. So
Right.
yes,
Yeah.
listening to the poor. And the other thing I'll quickly mention is, you know, failure at the beginning is not a completely bad thing. It
Oh no, no. Yeah.
refocuses you. And for us, we were so embarrassed by asking people for help and having nothing to show for it that as a board, everyone decided to that we would pay for all the expenses. We would pay for printing and travel and things like that, and that any money that people donated would go directly to help the poor. And so 38 years later, we're still doing that. Any money that people donate goes directly to buy food, to pay for teachers, to pay for cooks, to serve the people that we're working with. So
Oh wow.
yeah,
So and this thing is really ballooned for you guys. Just the types of okay. So Now you've got, after first starting up down there, you got bathrooms. So the women selling their wares, I'm guessing it's jewelry and whatnot, um, in the streets, don't have to go. I mean, they don't have to hold it
Right,
or
right.
or duck around a building or something.
Yeah.
So they did that, and then you started a school, and it's just kind of ballooned, hasn't it? You're
It
teaching
has.
jobs and skills, and you're giving employment, not giving,
Yep.
you're employing people
Yep.
to work down there.
Yep. And so, you mentioned that bathroom thing, and which is, a kind of an important little anecdote in our story also, because when you're poor and maybe you're indigenous, you don't have a lot of dignity, or you're treated without respect. It's easy
Yeah.
to lose your dignity when you have no place to go to the bathroom, for God's sake. So that is that's the foundation of what we do. So kids and moms come, they get a meal, they get a couple of hours of class, but they're also loved, and they're treated with respect, and they're treated with dignity. And we say, hey, if you come once a week and just have a meal and leave, we love you. If you come every day and stay for classes and eat, then we still love you. It doesn't
Right.
matter. We're here to support you, and again, know that you are an important person, that you have a value. And even so, I mentioned our loan program. We loan $100, 2,000 pesos, more or less, at the exchange rate
Okay.
today. Nobody gets rich off of it. But what the women do is we've taught them how to make jewelry. We've taught them how to weave purses and weave baskets. So now they buy the raw materials. They create the baskets, the purses, the embroidery, the jewelry, and they set a table up at their market, and now they sell it. So it again, they're not getting rich, but they are providing for their family. They're feeling
Yes.
good about themselves. And the number one piece of feedback that we get back from the women is, thank you for having the confidence in me to loan me money. Nobody would loan me money. Yeah, and again, sometimes
Yeah.
people, you borrow money off the street, you pay 1,000% interest every month. This is a loan with no
Oh,
interest, pay back when you can, and the women pay back. We have like a 97% payback rate. So it's really, really a
wow.
remarkable thing.
That's so cool. Yeah, that was the other thing I was thinking about was the dignity that you give these people. You know, it's here in the States, that would, I mean, the opposite of that would be giving an unhoused person some money and saying, "Don't buy drugs with it," because that's, you're not giving dignity that way, right?
Right.
Um, and you guys are exactly the opposite of that, and it's so important. Having gone 38 years now,
Hmm.
is it, the schools must have produced. I mean, you've probably seen. I don't know if you have a standard, K through 12 system there, but have you seen the results of that education come back?
So,
Some of them must have graduated and gone off into the world and done something.
yes, yes. And so I just wanted a little bit about language. So obviously, we don't give them dignity. We
Right.
reflect back their dignity. We help them to see it and experience and believe in themselves. And I
Thank
think
you for that. Yeah.
back to what you're saying. We have had some of the students. So we don't offer a degree or a diploma. We're
Right.
supplemental to public education. So we've had several students complete their public education and come back, and we've hired them as teachers, because they've completed their college education as teachers as well. So we've hired them to do that. Some of the children of our cooks have gone on to culinary school.
Wow.
We have, I think, when we hire somebody and pay them legally according to all their rights, their vacation pay, their social security, when a family now has a steady income, a stable income. It allows their children not to start to go to work when they're 12 years old. So
Right.
the kids of our teachers, the kids of our cooks are now graduating. One is just graduated as a dentist. She's a dentist. Another as a physical therapist. So these now you're changing lives for generations and generations,
Yeah, I
and
was
it's
going to say none of
almost
that would have been
exclusive.
possible had it not
Right,
been for your organization.
right. No, it's so exciting. People, you talk so much about poverty, or you look at the poor and you say, um, "Oh, they don't have this. They don't have nice clothes. They don't have a nice house." But after getting to know and working so long with these folks in Mexico, you come to understand that they really have an abundance of things. They have an abundance of resilience. They have abundance of creativity. They have abundance of work ethic. So they work hard. They think outside the box. They need to survive. And that is all what we can tap into and set free when you give them an education, when you provide a steady, stable work environment for the parents, and that lets people really, really blossom.
Yeah, for sure. That's so cool. I think as we're what you guys are doing, I mean, with the current state of the U.S. as it is now, and how we seem to be pulling back governmentally um, aid for some of the poorer countries in the world, I think that just makes you guys shine all that much brighter because you're still doing this, and
Sure.
you're caring, and you're reaching out, and you're helping those that, had it not been for you, probably would not be able to live the life that you've given them. And it's not like you give them anything. I'm not saying you give them,
Right.
but you're giving them the ability, the means to do that,
Right.
to create their own lives.
Yeah. When we first started, we come from the United States. We come from North America, and we're in Mexico, and we're working with poor communities. And people there are incredibly thankful, incredibly grateful, and they realize that, hey, this is part of the story of the United States, the beacon on the hill, the shining example, and we help others who don't have. So we were part of that. Now things have changed a bit. So we've pulled back. The government has pulled back, almost everything. There are
Yeah.
stories, sad stories about people dying of AIDS who used to get care, or cholera even, who used to get
Yeah.
health care from U.S. Organizations, or organizations that were funded by USAID. So
Yeah.
now we're kind of the exception to the rule in Mexico. And, it can make you angry that when you talk to the moms that we work with down there, they're worried. Are you going to leave us? Is Vamos going to close? Are you leaving? And so to add more worry and more concern for a
Yeah.
poor mother, that's not what the United States, my United States, is all about. So,
Right.
you
Yeah.
know,
I never even considered that they
yeah.
might think that you were leaving.
Right, they don't know the difference. We
Yeah.
listen. We accept no government money from Mexico or the United States. We've always sown an independent road as far as funding goes. So,
That's so incredible. And speaking of funding, see how I did? See what I did there?
mhm.
No. Um, let's talk about nonprofit funding for a minute, because, and there are a lot of, and I'm not complaining, I should make that clear, but the reality is that there are a lot of nonprofits who had their funding cut in the country. I've spoken to executive directors of food shelves, for example,
Mhm.
who depended on funding that's not there anymore. The executive director of a shelter for people who were living in domestic violence, their funding that they had relied on, that they had planned on, is not there anymore. How does that now? You guys don't take any government funding, so this really shouldn't affect you. How do nonprofits? Where does their funding come from? I don't understand that world. I don't live in that world. Um, so I'm curious, where does funding for these organizations come from?
Yeah, sure. So the United States is a big provider of funding for NGOs, for non-government organizations. So um, it's not necessarily you're working for the United States government when you are helping AIDS in Africa or when you're helping flood victims somewhere. There are organizations, nonprofit organizations that get funding from the United States. So when their funding is cut off, the work that they're doing um, is going to end. They can't meet payroll. They can't buy supplies. They can't transport those supplies overseas. So that ends up, and there's no that I don't know the exact number, but we're talking billions of dollars from USAID. That
Yeah.
money is not going to be replaceable. People can go back out these organizations and raise more money, but to replace that much money is not in the cards.
Right.
When you get down to this next level of organizations that may take some government money, but are more like Vamos. So we get funding from corporations. So corporations often help in the areas that they work in the area in the sort of the business area that they work in. If they're food
Right.
producers, maybe they help with food. If they're pharmaceuticals, maybe
So
they
a
help with drugs.
Cargill for
Right.
for
And they
food
help then in
shelves.
those areas. So corporate grants, and there's nobody more generous. There's no country more generous than the United States, both
Yeah.
its corporations and its people. So individuals are next. Individuals give so much money. There are family foundations that give money to Vamos. Church groups and churches and religious orders give money. So that's where we get basically our money from. Some small corporate grants, family foundations, but so much from individuals. So you need to be trusted, and you need to build relationships with people, and then show them where their money goes. Show them what they are actually doing, and that's really helps Vamos when we can tell you that every dollar you donate goes to help the women and children in Mexico.
Oh yeah, that's huge. That's absolutely enormous. And yeah, what you're and you had done some of this before you came to Vamos, right?
Yep, yep.
You worked
Years
with
ago, in previous world, I was a film and video producer. Then I worked for a nonprofit called HopeWorks. We worked with youth in a really poor town here called Camden, New Jersey, right outside of Philadelphia. A great organization as well.
yeah, and I mean, so that you obviously had contacts from your work with HopeWorks,
Hmm.
and so that must have been valuable when you brought your skills to Vamos.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. No, the skills in looking for funding and how to write grants and how to tailor your grants towards a specific organization really came from my time at Vamos. I mean,
Yeah,
my time at HopeWorks. I'm sorry.
I knew that. I knew what
Yeah.
you meant. And so that's so cool. What you guys are doing is absolutely amazing, Sean. I that's because giving dignity, well, reinforcing dignity, um, but you're giving opportunities that these people probably never would have had um, to sustain their lives and improve their lives.
Yeah.
And
You know,
and I think that's just incredible.
it is. I think that so many of us feel that way, and maybe now more than other times, but now I think there's a feeling in the world and the feeling in this country of what can I do? Things are so overwhelming. Things are out of control. Things are not how I like them. And what can I do? I better hunker down. Um, I better, take care of myself. But here in the States, people, first of all, I want to say that Vamos can't do that. We can't just stick to ourselves. So when things
Right.
are tough, we need to double down and to work harder with the women and children that we work with. And people, when you have that feeling, that paralysis, that you're overwhelmed, I think the best thing to do is to do something, to volunteer somewhere, to to help out somewhere, to donate somewhere, like to a Vamos or to the Cancer Society, the Red Cross, or whoever it may be. But
Right.
don't just. This is not the time to sit back and let others control things. You can do your bit. You can do your little piece, and then the more people that do their little bits, it turns out into something really great and really beautiful.
Absolutely. And I think if there's anything that this podcast strives for with every episode is to inspire and motivate. Have, somebody listens to this podcast and they go, well, maybe I can't help the working poor in Mexico, but I can volunteer down at my food shelf.
Right. Right.
Maybe I can't make $100 donation to Vamos.
Right.
But I can, volunteer somewhere else.
Yeah.
I can give my time if I don't have money.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what I go for every episode. And I think stories like yours absolutely inspire and motivate people to do that in their own lives. And I appreciate you for that.
Yeah. Thanks, Mike. Thanks. It reminds me of a woman that I met. We were sitting outside of her little shack. She was boiling some potatoes on the fire. She invited me to sit down on a bucket that was turned over. That's the best chair she could have. We talked about how hard her life was, what led her there. And, as the conversation's unfolding, I think, why am I not hearing, bitching and complaining and blame? Why am I instead? So I asked her about this, and she said, her line was, when your heart is full of gratitude, there's no room for blame. And so that's all of our hearts. And that's what I think your show tries to pull out of people. All of our hearts should be full of gratitude. Yeah. And when they're full of gratitude, it's hard to hate. It's hard to point fingers. We all do it, but it's a little bit harder when you can really be thankful for what you have and try and reach out and share that with others.
I absolutely love that. When your heart is full of gratitude, there's no room. How'd she say it?
There's no room to blame.
To blame.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. Sean, thank you so much for taking the time today. I really, really appreciate it. You're doing some amazing work, and thank you.
Mike, we need more shows like this. We need more, light in this world. So when it's better to light a candle than to curse the darkness, right? So you're our great, wonderful candle. Amen, here on the World Wide Web.
Thank you so much for that. I appreciate it, and we will talk to you soon.
Okay, thanks a lot, Mike.
I want to thank you for taking this time to listen to this episode with my guest, Sean Dougherty. I hope you're able to take something positive from the time you spent with me. Maybe you'll be inspired, maybe you'll be motivated, maybe you'll even be moved. If you experienced any of those positive feelings, please consider sharing this podcast with your friends and family. I'm always striving to offer you a better podcast, so give me some feedback. Let me know how you think I'm doing. Email me, leave me a message on my socials. It would mean the world. Also, feel free to follow us on our social media, like Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and TikTok. This podcast is part of the Mayday Media Network. If you have an idea for a podcast and need some production assistance, or if you already have a podcast and are looking for a supportive network to join, check out MaydayMediaNetwork.com. And check out the many different shows like Afrocentric, Spoil My Movie, Generation Mixtape, In a Pickle Radio Show, Wake Up and Dream with D. Anthony Palin, Stacks O'Pax, and The Time Pals. We'll be back again next week with a new episode, and we would be honored if you would join us. You've been listening to the Kindness Matters podcast. I'm your host, Mike Rathbun. Have a fantastic week.